Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give folks just a minute to join the webinar. My name is Anisa Aven. And hello, Kendall. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning where you are, that is.
Good point.
In the sunny Northwest. All right, we've got folks coming on today. I'm very excited to. I'm a complete nerd when it comes to strategy and strategic thinking, and so I'm very excited to have you guys with us today. We're going to try to make this very meaningful for you, and so feel free to interrupt us at any time if there's any questions that you have or a way in which we can redirect our conversation to be meaningful for you. We want to make that happen. So I'm going to jump right on in. I'm going to share my screen. You guys let me know when you can see it. Let's see. Share screen. Okay. You guys can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. So our conversation today is all about strategic foresight. It's how to think ahead for business unusual. And as this summit is really about coaching and development, we really want to take the angle not just from executive strategy and strategic thinking, but also value creation. How HR and leaders who want to coach their teams can do a better job at fostering that value creation mindset and the competency of critical analysis and strategic analysis across every employee level and for every position. So very quickly, I want to say thank you to the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. David Whitmarsh and his team have put together this summit and has graciously invited us to participate. So thank you very much, David. Kendall, last minute, I was telling folks in our morning call this morning that I was looking at my agenda and just realized that everything had changed over the last 12 months. And the conversation around, oh, how are we going to manage getting back to work and post-pandemic and all of this? We're already managing that. We're already managing by fire. What I decided that we really needed to bring forward was a more strategic approach to seeing ahead, not just around this current fire. There's a lot of change coming down the pike in the next 6 months, 8 months, 12 months with disruptive technologies and new businesses, as well as all of the shuttering businesses. So I reached out to Kendall, and Kendall is president and COO of the Sharpen Group, a management consulting firm. He is an experienced CEO, management consultant, and chartered financial analysis. He has more than 15 years of success creating bottom line impact through targeted financial and operations management initiatives. He's worked in $100 million revenue and up organizations. And I would love, Kendall, if you would share a little bit with us about yourself, what you're up to, a little bit about Sharpen Group, and then we can move forward on this strategic conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I think that, probably fair to disclose to everyone that I came to my current role and through my recent roles as leader of an organization through the finance department. I came up so at heart, I'm a numbers guy, and so that kind of an analytical bent kind of underlies everything that I think about when it comes to strategy and when it comes to how to implement strategy. And I think that not that I've learned plenty of hard lessons over the years about how the people aspect of that shapes how the numbers actually work, and have developed some principles and some ideas around that as well. But the Sharpen Group is a consulting firm that's targeted on the mid-market or small businesses, and is specifically targeted on helping small and mid-sized businesses develop strategies to scale. So a lot of times businesses are good at what they do, but they aren't good. And that means they're good at working in the business, but they are so busy working in the business, they don't work on the business. And because of that, there are natural limitations to the amount of business they can do at their best performance level. Sharpen is our mission is to help businesses with organizational, marketing, technology, and pricing analysis and analytical structures that help create the underpinnings of a scalable organization, that help that a $25 million company become a very successful $50 million company, leverage the abilities of the people that are there, do a little bit of work on the business, and give it the ability to extend its value proposition to twice as many customers. That's we have had some success doing that over the years. Um, my wife and I are the principals of this organization. We've each worked in 2 or more organizations that scaled by 3x to as much as 10x in under 5 years. So it's something that we've seen a number of times, and we kind of know what the what the missing pieces are in an organization that's having trouble bridging that, what we call the scalability gap.
The scalability gap is right. Well, and leveraging the people. A lot of the folks that are going to listen to this webcast later, as well as on the call right now, are responsible for helping organizations leverage the people. And my experience with you, Kendall, is you have a coach approach to everything that you do. And I think a little bit later, we're going to talk a little bit about the complexity that adding people adds. And we're also going to talk about the coach approach to supporting folks in understanding the value creation mindset and how their role, no matter what the role is, contributes to the organization's ability to have success. And when the company is successful, they get to be successful. So thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. This is I'm looking forward to it.
Beautiful. So a little bit about me. My name is Anisa Aven, and I am the CEO and founder of Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions. Been working in the training and development space since about 1997. And Turnkey in particular, we have a team of coaches and trainers and organizational development consultants all over the US and in key hubs globally. And most recently, what we're finding folks are giving us a call often for is around the areas of fostering that strategic thinking skill in their leadership team, supporting even their frontline managers in understanding the value creation mindset. The other thing that we're getting lots of calls for right now is we have an amazing team in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. In fact, some of the I'll just call them those premier thinkers that even began the conversations around training and development for DEI work on our team. So let's move to our agenda. So we're going to talk about strategic foresight, building that muscle through successful strategy execution, not just the execution physically, but the execution mentally first. We're going to talk about how to read the signpost of a healthy to unhealthy to troubled organization and back. We're going to talk about looking for trim tabs. Trim tab is that lever on the really big ship that moves the ship in the direction you want. That's actually the leverage. So we're going to look for leverage points or models, and we're going to share a few with you in order for you to take back to your team or take back to your own business unit regarding something called the 27 challenges that every business and every business unit will face, with a few exceptions. And then the 3 priorities. Every priority in a business or a business unit will focus in one of 3 areas: people gate, process gate, or profit gate. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to use that model to prioritize our thinking and our attention. So Kendall actually introduced this really good book to me, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, in January of this year. And I've learned a lot from it. But one of the quotes that the author, Richard Rumelt, said that I really liked was, good strategy works by focusing energy and resources on one or a very few pivotal objectives whose accomplishments will lead to a cascade of favorable outcomes. Kendall, what was one of your, good takeaways from this book?
Yeah, I think that probably the most important thing, two really important things I drew from this. The most important thing I think was a strategy, as much as anything, is deciding what not to do. I think that in order to maintain the focus that's required to actually accomplish the objectives, deciding what not to do is a great place to start.
I think that's a fair statement. I think that um, when strategy is decided at the executive level, those who are in charge of then fulfilling the strategy don't always get to choose what not to focus on. How, as a senior leader and visionary and CEO, have you empowered your operational leaders to have input into what they should focus on, as well as the strategy itself?
Well, this is kind of a, I think this is a tricky piece to pull off for an owner or a CEO of a small to mid-sized company, because the personality and the presence of the leader in that organization often is a very strong one, and often there's a certain area of thinking about the business that is reserved for the CEO, and a lot of times it's hard to pull that that type of thinking and that participation out of even the next layer of leadership in that company. So I think as the most important thing there for the CEO is to make sure that that is welcome and expected of the rest of the leadership team, that they are in fact critical elements of the strategy, and there can't be really there's not very unlikely to be a good strategy that's sole sourced, and there's no one person who knows enough about any business to create I guess put it another way, a democratic process will work better than an autocratic one every time.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit later about fostering that, crowdsourcing, buy-in, collaboration, strategic resourcefulness, et cetera. So I think that is in my experience in working with organizations of various sizes, every business unit that is more successful than its counterpart or its peer group has a greater capacity to foster that value creation and that buy-in at the individual level, but also they do a better job of not just command and control. Here's the strategy, do as do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. But building that coaching culture where there's input and resourcefulness and courage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when the there's a there's when the leadership team participates and is active in the creation of the vision for the organization and its mission and its values, and then the strategy process that really gets renewed every year, or it should. The renewal process should begin at the management level. It should come from the bottom up, and it probably should. One of the places that we've been really successful in the past is starting out with a survey, like getting some information from the employees. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? What do you see in your interaction with customers that is keeping us from being as good as we could be? And then coming up a level. And I know that some of the tools that you've used are really valuable in pulling insight out of the leadership team in terms of how they view the business organization and how it functions. And I think that getting that information out and visible and making it again part of a democratic process, I think is really critical to creating a strategy that everyone can and will align on.
Agreed. Agreed. I think some leaders are a little afraid of that whole democratic process, but that too can be a skill developed to develop. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. What's the difference between strategic thinking, strategic planning, and strategic foresight? For me, strategic thinking is just that. I can think strategically about what I'm going to have for breakfast, right? If my mood is, chocolate covered waffles, great. I can be strategic, right? About, I'm going to fulfill my value of pleasure in this moment. Or I can say, no, I'm looking to healthy. One of my intentions were to increase my fruit intake. So now I'm going to be strategic in choosing the granola with non-fat yogurt covered in amazing blueberries, right? So strategic thinking is the process of that analysis on a individual task or individual decision or individual goal basis. Strategic planning is the process of putting it all together in a cohesive plan, blueprint. And then, of course, strategic foresight is that practice of gathering information and thinking critically about the impact of external influences on the business. So things like trends and political factors and legal environments and technical and environmental. What's your perspective on how organizations view these three, what I consider to be distinct but interrelated skills?
Well, I think that strategic planning is a process, and it's something that can be, you know, injected into the culture and into the natural operating rhythm of of a company, of an organization. Strategic thinking is a little different. That's a little more personal, and it's and frankly, there are some people who are more inclined to be strategic thinkers than others, and and I think that it doesn't necessarily default to the leader of the organization being the best strategic thinker. But there are people who are just by their nature think about second order effects. They think about follow on impacts of things that could be happening around the business or that the business may choose to undertake. And so strategic thinking is really, it's the ability to, it's a little bit like, different playing checkers and playing chess. When you play chess, you've got to be thinking about what the opponent's move response to your move is going to be and what your response to that move is going to be. And maybe if you're really good at it, you're probably thinking about 2 or 3 more of those in a row. And so that's, strategic thinking is, I think that's an important, it comes back to what we're talking about, making it a democratic process. You're going to get more wisdom out of your strategic thinking if you draw from the strategic thinking contributions of as many people in the process as you can.
Yeah.
And then strategic foresight, I think, is it's a natural, it's a follow-on effect of having strategic thought in your strategic plan, and then the strategic plan itself needs to be renewed, tested, and validated almost constantly, so that the foresight comes from gathering information, understand the effects of that information. In other words, if you consider it again back to the chess analogy, you made a move, you opened up in a new market, there was some follow-on consequences or effects of that. You saw that how that impacted your results. You make another move to adjust to that. So your strategic foresight really it's impossible for anyone to say what's going to happen. But if you have a good understanding of your business and your business model, you can understand the effects or the expected effects of moves that you make or your or the competitors or that occur in the market through understanding your business model and how those things impact it.
Yeah. And from my experience, leaders who have a good core understanding of their business model don't always, that's an accurate statement, don't always and or effectively train or coach or develop their team in such a way as to where they understand the model with the same level of awareness as the leaders. And I think that's a critical mistake in many leadership development programs. They just miss the business acumen piece altogether, as if it's an assumed skill because they're in a leadership position. I want to move towards talking a little bit about the signpost. For you, either you were born with this strategic foresight or you developed this. So what do you consider to be the best practice for being able to notice the signpost and see around the corner?
Well, I think that, again, I think that, and this is, to your point that you just made, is this I can't, it is more uncommon, it is less likely to be the case that a business has built an actual quantitative model of a business model that that it can use to estimate the effects of different changes on margins, on material costs, on labor productivity, on market share, on how do those things affect cash flow? How do they affect our relationship, with our bank covenants? How do they affect our ability to invest in new capital projects? So the the first thing to, I think, for a business in order to put itself in a position to be strategic and think strategically is to build a model of the business that describes how strategic moves will affect important things like cash flow and margins and you know uh, bank covenants or other things that might be in or capacity for that matter, our ability, when do we reach capacity of our current production or um, assets. That so the first thing to do is to have a model so that as you go through time that you can evaluate the effect of changes that you put into effect in your strategy. You can see those playing out in your results. Your model refines itself over time. You become better and better at, as to your, use your phrase, seeing around corners. You can now start to project forward, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. What, based on what's happening to you now, what are the things you're going to be dealing with in 3 months or 6 months that, if you wait 3 or 6 months, could be life-threatening. And so I think that the first and foremost, is have a model of your business that allows you to test your assumptions and to validate them and to do what if analysis, constantly.
So I find that a lot of organizations think they have a model, right? They're like, we know how to run our business. We have our pieces of how we do our work, and people already know it. You don't take that approach in the organizations you work with. How exactly did you develop that skill of creating unique models in order to see around the corner, to notice those signposts before they're, DEFCON 5?
Well, I think that that comes back to, I came up, through the finance side of the organization. And, I think I am by nature more of a strategic thinker. I tend to be more, frankly, I'm a better strategist than I am a tactician. And so, I think that the being curious as a CFO, I think this is where a strategic CFO comes into play. You need a CFO, someone in the finance department who's curious and analytical, and who will dig a layer deeper in your data to help you find critical relationships that make that model valuable and speak to more people in the organization. And by one of the things that I guess an example that I might use for that is an easy way to build a financial model would be to say, well, our labor cost is generally 14% of revenue, and we're projecting that going forward. But the truth of the matter is, labor costs probably averages 14% of your revenue, but on some of your work it's 12, and some of your work it's 18. And so what you need to be able to model is, if you get more of the 18 work and less of the 12, what does that look like? And as you start to see those things occur in your business, you have you have already thought about what your response to that might be, and you've already developed the associated strategies in your business or tactics that will help you keep that 14 number instead of migrating towards the 18, which of course is, other things being equal, will be less, less income, less bottom line for the business. So I think that having having an analysis capability in your business that's capable of digging a layer deeper and saying, yeah, that 14 is the average, but what does that average consist of? And what if the variables within that average move to one end of that spectrum or the other? And how does our business look if that happens? How do we keep that from happening? How do we make that move towards the good side? That's where you can start to develop actual strategies that affect the outcomes in your business.
Yeah, very good. Sheila had a comment in our chat. She says, I agree 100%, Paige. The ability to comprehend or apprehend patterns and comprehend patterns in your analysis is very important to strategic thinking. And that leads me almost exactly into the signposts that I think are really important for HR departments, is making the business case around a model that allows them to go to the decision-making table with their analysis, their model. And I really like the work that we do based on James Fisher's work, and I'll talk about that in a moment. He wrote the book Navigating the Growth Curve, and in the model of what a healthy company movement looks like. If you're looking on the screen, what you see is far left is 20% preparation, in the middle is 70% performance, and that of course leaves us with 10% of pressure. And anytime in an organization that we see the pressure go up, which it's going to, depending on new initiatives and mergers and acquisitions and changes in the environment, right? It's going to go up. What we don't want to have happen is for it to move from that 10% to 40% and beyond without us stressing. It's one thing to have 10 more percent of pressure. It's a whole nother thing. And the impact of an organization that doesn't address the pressure cooker or the challenges that their employees are facing when it gets to 40% is significant. So what ends up happening is we only have so many attention units, right? So if our attention units are on what's on fire 40% of the time, that means our actual performance working on the business instead of in the business now decreases. From that healthy organization of about 70% of my time is in the flow, and only 20% of my time, preparation, 20%, 20/70, 10 is what a healthy organization looks like. 10% preparation, 50% performance, and 40% pressure is what an unhealthy organization looks like. Now, let's get to the place where many, many, many organizations allow themselves to get, and that is 70% pressure cooker, only 10% performance, and 20% preparation. They're trying. They've increased their preparation time. I'm creating strategies. I'm sending out memos. We're having town halls, but the pressure cooker has not been dealt with. And so that's when you start seeing employee disengagement, employee turnover, costs go up, losing some of your star performers, missed opportunities, certainly missed deadlines. And what we want to do when we're looking at, thinking in terms of model to improve our ability to see around the corner in HR, we want to look and see what is the health of our organization. And of course, a pulse survey and an engagement survey, those are some of the tools that can be helpful. But what I find is that most organizations don't know what to do with it when they get to this unhealthy or troubled. They don't know how to properly analyze the source of that pain at the employee level, at the operational level. So in thinking in terms of value creation, I have observed that organizations that don't just have a dusty strategic plan on the shelf, but actually make it an operational strategic plan where those goals are cascaded throughout the organization, but where the organization and the employees actually have a means of communicating their feedback, their ideas, what's working for them and what's not, that two-way. There is an easier path of the value creation mindset and understanding that when the organization is successful, you're successful. You're successful when you help the organization, et cetera. So I wanted to have you, Kendall, share a little bit about that value creation mindset. It's one of the key factors of crowdsourcing, in employee generated ideas and employee innovations. Will you talk to us a little bit about the importance of helping employees know how they create value in the organization? Is also, I happen to know that you're a leader who believes in the power of coaching. How did you go about coaching your team that, even your most recent one, you guys created some amazing growth in, while at the same time exploding your acquisitions? How did you coach your team to understand how value creation can support them personally in fulfillment as well as the organization?
Well, I think that there's kind of two layers of that, and the most basic one, and the most, and I think probably an obvious one, is nobody, at least in my 30 years of experience, I haven't run across too many team members, not just say that there aren't some, but who care about anything at the business until they know what it means for them. And so that's a perfectly rational response. And it's not selfish or in any way to be discredited. It's just natural for everybody to say, okay, what does it mean for me? Here's where I start. Where I start is, if you are creating value, then you are by definition valuable. If you are valuable, then you are likely due for a raise. And so, the way that the first thing to do is to link those concepts to, because that's what everyone, everyone wants a better place to work. They want a more reasonable boss. They want more money. They want a better work experience. And so there's part of that work experience is, how does this affect my compensation and my probably the, and I can, quantitatively link the value that I create to the value of my position. And that's that's a conceptually, that's an important point to get across. And the second one, which starts to make that a little less pragmatic, perhaps, or is, it's also a lot more fun to work in a place where value is being created. Why? Because we can do more training, we can do more development, we create opportunities where people can change jobs and grow and find upward mobility. And you start to develop a vision around what a value creating organization can provide and presents in terms of a place of employment, that one that struggles to do that does not. And so there's two layers of that. First and foremost, I'm, and maybe I may be thinking about this more practically than others would, but I start with what I know is what I believe to is going on in every employee's head when we start talking about what we're going to, manage change or do things differently. What does it mean for me? And so first thing, I start with that. Here's what it means for you. If you're creating value, you're valuable. If you're valuable, that's definitely better for you than not being valuable. And here's how that manifests itself in a better place to work.
I love it. If you're creating value, you're valuable. If you're valuable, you're due for a raise. I think
Right.
everyone should take that home. So we're going to talk very quickly about a couple of concepts, and leave you with an exercise for strengthening your strategic foresight and problem solving muscle. So at a high level, strategic management, all business challenges will fall into three areas. That's the three gates of focus. It's profits, people, and process. What that allows us to do when we're thinking in terms of, oh my gosh, there's so many problems to focus on. Well, which is it? Is it a people issue, a process issue, or a profit issue? And the focus of those uh, will be will have different priority depending on the health of the organization and the size of the organization, their where they are on their growth trajectory. The second is that there are 7 predictable stages of growth in business. And if we can identify the right targets at the right time and proactively prepare, we can see what's ahead of us just because we know where we are on the growth trajectory. And then finally, there's only 5 challenges. All businesses face 27 challenges, but there's only 5 that we need to focus on in our current stage of development, for example. And these concepts are based on the 7 stages of growth, which is was an intensely researched body of work by author and strategist James Fisher. He interviewed 650 successful companies, spent a lot of time with the CEOs. And what he discovered was that there are some very distinct stages of growth that organizations will go to. When an organization has over 500 employees, these same stages end up applying to any operational business unit that is a profit center. Some of these challenges apply to business units that aren't a profit center. But all of these challenges will apply to businesses as they grow. So if we look at uh, our lessons learned, I want to go backwards a little bit to go forward, because in a moment we're going to talk about those 27 challenges. Um, let's talk a little bit about something you said earlier, the strategic misses. We learn as much from our misses as we do our bullseyes. So Kendall, I don't want to throw you in the grease, but I'm gonna. So tell us about a failure that you learned from that continues to influence how you strategize and help companies become more strategic, see around the corner, learn from their challenges.
So I think that a critical underpinning of the way I think about strategy now is that strategy is best um, executed when it evolves. And so I think that when you move towards your strategy in small pieces where you can test assumptions, validate your theories and your beliefs, and 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 when those things are shown to be off or slightly off, you can make adjustments and continue to move towards your direction of your strategic vision. The mistake I've made, and maybe I'm a little thick-headed. I've made it more than once, is to try to move all the way to from current state to the realization of the vision in one bold move. And an example of that is I used to own a small manufacturing company, and we made components for home construction. And I developed a vision about how we would be a better, more valuable partner to our home builder customers if we were also able to install components, and we would be able to do more, provide a more integrated value proposition. And rather than buy one trailer full of tools and hire one crew and have them go out and test my assumptions about how much it would cost to frame a house and how much value I would create for my customers and how much I would charge for it. I bought 10, and that strategy did not turn out to be wrong. But 2 to 3 very painful years later is when I found out what the right version of it looked like. And so that was a very painful and constant reminder to me that your assumptions must be tested. And you must, especially when you're talking about making commitments of capital and things that you can't come back from, you can't really you you can't know enough about what reality is, because at the end of the day, your assumptions and what happens are rarely the same.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. That makes a lot of sense. We had a couple of questions come in. I apologize, folks, for missing the chat. Manny had a very interesting question. What are some core challenges people face when moving into more strategic thinking, and how can they get past it?
Well, I think that probably the fundamental underlying issue is, am I a short-term thinker or am I a long-term thinker? And I think that Jack Welch was at one time sort of an icon in terms of business lexicon. And I think that a lot of one of the things I think that continues to endure as a true statement is you have to be both. And so especially the further up the leadership um, you know or in the organization that you are, where your job is, where your role is, then the more you have to be both short and long-term thinking. So I think that there's two important aspects of that. One is you have to not let the leadership team can't let itself off the hook to say, well, I can't be a long-term thinker because I have so many short-term things to think about. They don't have the option of being just one or the other. But by the same token, if you're going to go about the process of implementing a strategy, you have to, that strategy itself and the organization that supports it has to acknowledge that people have jobs, and implementing strategies isn't usually part of a job description of, certainly not in small to mid-market type companies. Maybe by the time you get to a Fortune 500 or a global type of organization, you've got people whose actual job it is to implement strategies. But when you're a 100 or a $300 million company, or a $50 million company, there isn't anyone there who isn't busy serving customers and making and helping the business operate. So I think organizationally, the ownership, the leaders have to build into the strategy and organization design that takes that into account. And here's an example. A great example of this is you come up, you meet for 3 days, in November, December, to formulate next year's business plan, and the strategy that you're going to align on for a 3-year plan. Part of that strategy is to do more and better marketing in a different market, and you don't want to incur any cost associated with that. You just want the benefits, so you assign it to the sales guy. Well, now the sales guy has a choice: generate revenue, or do the marketing implementation, the implementation of our marketing strategy. And that's really common. There's no organization adjustment to the fact that this guy now has, or this person, this man or woman, has now his responsibility to do something big that moves the needle for the organization. But guess what? If the revenue doesn't come in every day, that doesn't matter. So I think that as a leader of an organization, you have to acknowledge that they're implementing a strategy is going to require some adjustments in your organization design to support what you're going after.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move to some the 27 challenges that every business or business unit will face. I really love this exercise because it forces a company or a business unit to put words to their critical top 5 issues. Provides an opportunity to see how the leadership team or those in management actually defines their company's or business units top challenges. It forces a discussion that moves the company towards alignment. Just having a conversation around prioritizing what our most important challenges are is something that can change, can collapse silos and move people towards buy-in and alignment, and therefore greater execution. It allows the management team, leadership team, to build confidence as they proactively tackle those most pressing issues. So those 27 challenges, I'm happy to share these with anyone on that would like to have a list of these. They range in terms from profits are inadequate to grow the company, or inadequate to justify the business unit, to we need an improved business profit design or employee turnover, all of those that you see on the screen. But what's critical is that depending on your stage of growth, and the stage is always impacted in complexity by the number of employees. So think in terms of a stage 1 business unit is going to have somewhere between 1 and 10 employees. And those, or an organization that has between 1 and 10 employees, they're going to have the same top 5 business challenges. You have a business unit that's a profit center. Cash flow may not be the challenge, but justifying that this unit exists and is a profit center is going to have to be a challenge, right? Destabilized by chaos, slow getting programs to market, limited capital growth, or in cases of business units, limited justification for the business unit to exist unless there's the right kind of revenue to justify it. If we move down the line to larger organizations, all the way to the right, you see stage 7, there's only 5, right? That doesn't mean that all of the issues from the previous stages have been solved. In fact, what happens most often than not, if an organization is stage 4, they have somewhere between 35 and 57 employees, or a business unit is that, they're going to have, if they haven't resolved what's going on or their challenges that they were experiencing as a stage 4 company, and now they've moved to 500 employees, they're still going to have those problems. But that's where you get into that pressure zone of 40, 70% pressure, et cetera. And so being able to identify what exactly are our top priorities and in what order do we solve them helps you to be more strategic. If you're a stage 7 company, the 5 things you want to be working on is, how do we make sure our products are differentiated, and how do we ensure that the same profit margin that got us here is sustainable? Or how do we move more quickly now that we're a cruise liner and not a speedboat? What do we need to do to be nimble and agile and get our programs to market faster, right? What I see, though, in organizations that haven't fostered that value creation mindset along the way, or organizations that don't spend enough time coaching, training, developing that strategic foresight, strategic thinking, critical analysis, is they're still stuck working on weak program management, or difficulty diagnosing problems, or employee turnover, or worse, imagine stage 7 companies that don't have their systems in place. And I see it every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. If I told you one of our clients has over 100,000 employees, and Kendall, do not pass out when I tell you this, still operating their expenses on Excel spreadsheets. 100,000 employees. So it happens, right? Just missed getting that process into a better position. And I don't mean exported to Excel. I mean managed on Excel.
That's costing them an astonishing amount of money.
Exactly. Exactly. And the ability to think critically and say, how much is this methodology actually costing us? Was something that we worked a little bit on. So that framework can really be helpful. Like I said, I'm happy to share this with you, but you want to be able to take it back to your team and just select what are the top 5 that are most important right now that we must solve before we can actually move towards solving the ones that we really want to. The other thing that model that I want you guys to take away is this concept around the 3 gates of focus, right? There's the profit gate, the people gate, and the process gate. We haven't talked enough, Kendall, about the numbers, and they're a very important function to understanding how to be more strategic. And every function, every business unit, every leader should know their numbers. So what numbers are important for every function to understand in order for them to be more strategic in their roles?
Well, I think that, and this is difficult, not something that's just put in place with a snap of your fingers. But again, I think that there are multiple ways to evaluate performance of any role inside the organization, multiple dimensions of performance that need to be considered. But at the end of the day, everybody has some quantitative contribution to the outcome that the business is trying to generate. And put in its simplest terms, that even if somebody has a job where it's not obvious or immediately readily simple to quantify their performance, you can develop ways to assess whether they're having good days or bad days. And I think at the end of the day, and again, this is kind of, in my view, the role of a strategic CFO, is for every role in the organization, there should be a way to link how their performance in their job, how it links to performance of the business. And again, it could be as simple as good days and bad days, and how good days accumulate into good months, and good months accumulate into good quarters, and good quarters are highly correlated with good results. And so I think that, first and foremost, and again, I think that this is a maybe an area that can be easily misunderstood, where people are managed by the numbers, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and impersonal, and it's not and it's not a realistic way for people to have a work life. But at the end of the day, I actually find that when there is better and more objective quantification and and performance measurement, that's liberating for people. That people who have that in their in their evaluation matrix have a source of truth, and that source of objective validation that they can use in all discussions with their coworkers, with their leaders, with other people that are involved with their process. The more objective we can make that, and the more valuable conversations between people and their managers can be, the more valuable conversations between one role and another can be. In for example, two roles that are in a related process that interact with each other. If there's a quantification of at some level that defines the truth of how that that work relationship is impacting the organization, then that's liberating. That actually creates the ability for those people to have a productive discussion about how to do better.
I love what you just had to say too. It's important not to mistake what we're talking about managing by the numbers, if we don't also acknowledge that there are leading indicators and lagging indicators, and the goal, the final outcome, that lagging indicator, if we're only managing by that, then we're really playing with fire as far as destroying employee morale. Whereas if we're managing more towards the leading indicators that will get us there, that's the difference between a whip and a I don't know what the analogy is, but
Yeah, well, no, I think that's a really good point, and I'll back that up with a parable that
good.
comes from from total quality management, from Deming. If you are going to measure people's output without creating standards and measurements for the quality of their input, then you have completely ineffective. You've completely missed it, and you've completely ineffective system. And the parable that he designed for that was, if you had a vat of beads in front of you that was 15% red beads and 85% white, and you asked people to scoop out of that vat repeatedly and held them accountable to come up with 25% red beads, then you have an unhealthy work relationship for that person. And so it's critical. And to your point, the leading indicator there is the percentage of red beads in the vat to begin with. And so that's exactly right. You have to be good enough at this, not just to measure output, but you have to be able to understand the quality of the input that ultimately drives the output to begin with.
Well said. So glad I invited you here. Okay, I'm going to leave you guys with two things as we start to wrap up. If you haven't ever read this book, How to Think Like Leonardo Da Vinci, it's one of my favorite. I think I read it when I was in my early 20s. But I use his exercise for solving problems literally on an almost daily basis. It's the best solution exercise ever. It's very simple. You write out 100 questions. What's the problem? You got 100, just write out 100 questions around that problem or around what you want to achieve. And it'll include things like, well, what's a leading indicator? What's another leading indicator? What's a lagging indicator, right? You want to notice the themes. So you're going to highlight this theme, anything that comes up. Next, you're going to pull out the 10 most powerful questions, and you're going to ask more questions. Eventually, your mind you cannot ask a question without your neurons beginning to fire, and they're going to start answering it. And you'll wake up in the middle of the night going, I have brilliance. I know exactly how to solve this. Once you have your 10 most powerful, you're going to rank order them. Teach this to your team, and you will be teaching them to think strategically, because guess what? They're going to get to about 10 questions and they're going to be like, I don't have any more. And you're going to say, nope, come up with 100. It's okay to expand the circle of what these questions are about, or the circumference, however you want to look at it. But this exercise develops that strategic foresight, that strategic thinking, that critical analysis muscle. And so I want to thank everyone for being here. And one thing that we have put together is a strategy accelerator just for folks that have come to our summit. It is a process of analyzing the 27 challenges. It's an assessment for your team. It includes where the leadership team is and the other folks on the team are in regards to what are our biggest priorities, what are our biggest strengths, or our top strengths, what are our top challenges. This process is usually about a $5,500 value for the summit special. We're doing it for $3,250. The outcome is enabling a value creation mindset, or at least the stake in the sand, so to speak, to the ground to make that happen. It's personalized coaching from a top strategy consultant on how to execute that plan. It is a debrief with the executive team or the leadership team of the business unit to accomplish that. Kendall, I want to make sure, so give us a call, send us an email if that's something you want to take advantage of. Kendall, I want to make sure folks have a way to get a hold of you.
Yeah. Well, you've nailed it. There it is.
Kendall at thesharpengroup.com. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kendall, for joining us. Thank you, folks, for sharing your day with us. And reach out if we can be supportive or if you have any feedback for us.
Thanks, Anisa.
All right. Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, everyone.